Hey everyone, we are just waiting for Chris to join. He's going to be Skyping in, as with most of these, so should just be just a minute or two more, hopefully. Yeah, we'll see you in just a second. Hello everyone, welcome back to CodeLabs. As always, really excited to have you with us. So today we are actually going to be joined by a CodeDay alumni, and I'll let him talk a little bit more about his background in just a second. CodeDay alumni who works on Uber's flying car division and has worked on a bunch of other cool projects in the last, I think, 5 years since he first started going to CodeDay. So very excited to welcome Chris. Chris, why don't you get started by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, so like Tyler mentioned, I work at Uber. We don't call it the flying car division here, we call it Uber Elevate, and it's but more or less what we're trying to do is, I mean, I guess we're trying to make electric airplanes that are really tiny and they can fly from one side of the city to another, like LA or Dallas. I'm like a hardware engineer and software engineer, and got started at CodeDay originally. In like 2013 or so. And so I love to work on projects. I actually brought my latest one. I have a Game Boy Advance, like the original one from when I was a kid, and I modified it to have a backlit screen. Originally, they don't have that. And also it works with my AirPods, like it has a Bluetooth in it. So that's, just what I did last weekend. And so I wanted to, I could talk about anything that has to do with like hardware hacking, software hacking, building fun projects like home automation or smart mirrors, all kinds
Yeah, so why don't to sort of get us kicked off here, like, what are some of the projects that you've worked on in the past? Like, what are I know that you've worked on a lot of cool things, and when we were talking the other day, I was complimenting. I think you're actually probably one of the SR&D alums who's finished the most side projects for their own personal use. So, like, what are some of the cool things that you've done in the past?
I got to work on a home automation project where we were trying to glue together a bunch of different things like Sonos and Philips Hues and the list, like Pebble, like when they were a thing. Particle, the Particle company makes like these cool Android IoT boards, so you could make like your blinds open and close automatically. And so I worked on that project with a friend Case, who I met at CodeDay. He was trying to make the UI for it, and I was working on kind of the Raspberry Pi backend of it to glue it all together. That was pretty fun. We ended up going to Maker Faire with that one in the Pebble booth. Got to demo that to some folks there. And then
sadly, two companies that both no longer exist.
Yeah, actually, it's a bummer, right? But yeah. It was really cool. And then another one was I made my girlfriend a smart mirror for Christmas a couple years ago. And so that was kind of the guts of a Raspberry Pi and a lap dock, which is like a screen and a battery laptop thing. And it was fun because when I gave it to her, we ended up spending the Christmas or winter break together, like redesigning. She's a product designer now, so she was really interested in UI design and web design. And so I'd given her like a piece of hardware with a kind of not so great UI, and then we together like got to redesign it and build that together. And that was like one of my first React projects, because on that one I was using Electron to do a full screen web browser on a Raspberry Pi. And so it's kind of learning all that at once for that one.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think that you've been very passionate about actually is the importance of like having someone to work with on projects. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think that I think it would be really hard to have learned as much as I have, as quickly as I have, without without people. I don't think I could do it alone. I think there's a lot of credit that needs to be given to the folks that I work with, the friends that I've made, and kind of the projects that we've gone in and done together. And it kind of comes down to like, well, I don't know. I don't know. I didn't know much. I didn't know anything when I started. I don't even have a CS degree. I did a couple years of community college and did some programming through that to get a basic understanding of Java and C++. But I didn't know anything about web development, HTML, JavaScript. My parents don't do that stuff. So it was really challenging it was really a challenging feeling. I knew I wanted to learn a thing or how to build something, because I've always got really interested. We always got really interested in like the idea or the challenge or the project, the thing that we were trying to solve. The problem solving part, but I didn't always know how to get there. And so I rely heavily on the people that I'm hanging out with and working on projects with to help fill in the gaps, especially in those early days where like they know some parts and I know some parts, and together we know enough to build the project. But alone it can be overwhelming or too daunting to often like go all the way through a project.
Sure. So, when you're talking about some of these projects that you've worked on, like, what is it that makes you interested in working on a project? And like, how do you pick what it is that you're going to do? Especially in terms of you have a really abstract idea, like. Well, I mean, like your day job, you have this, you're making flying cars in a sense. I don't know if they're really cars, but you're making flying.
Well, yeah.
Point-to-point transportation.
Yeah.
But even for any of these other projects too, with like the home automation and things like that. How do you decide? I have this abstract idea. I want to build a mirror, like an interactive mirror. How do you decide how to go forward from there?
So a few things. I guess first, get very excited about a challenge, or very excited about like, wouldn't it be cool to just have a mirror on the wall that you could see through, but it's also a monitor. Or like, cool, wake up and have like on the home automation one, I focused pretty much exclusively on the wake up experience. Like, how would it feel? Because it was hard to wake up in the morning. Like, I'm a night person, so for me, like, to wake up early or to be excited about getting out of bed in the morning, like anytime before like 10 a.m., it would have had to take like something really cool to be in my room to get me out. And so I thought about, okay, what was really cool when I, going into this hackathon? Well, for me, that's something that can open up my blinds, turn on my lights, and play Vampire Weekend when I woke up. And so that was enough. I was like, okay, how do we do that now? And so I went and found out, like, okay, how do people automate blinds? So they're basically pulling the blind. Like, how do I open a blind? Like, I just pull my blind open or close. So I was able to go and be like, well, if I find a motor that can spin and then get a piece of string or like beaded metal stuff, and then paper clip, like kind of screw that onto my blind, and then all of a sudden now I have a motor that's able to spin and pull my blind one way or another. If I hook that up then to like an Arduino particle board, now it's connected to Wi-Fi, and I could write a little script that lets you like turn that on and off. And so now all of a sudden I have, it's kind of, yeah, I mean, that was like how I built that automated blind thing, for example. And for Sonos, I did a lot of searching on GitHub and Google to see how do people reverse engineer the Sonos protocol. Like, there is a Sonos app that definitely has a way of like sending a play command to a Sonos. Has someone else done this before? I noticed that a lot of people online try a lot of things before I do. And so there's a lot of opportunity to learn from other people's code and projects. Even if they're halfway done, it might be enough to pull out some pieces and try it again, because maybe just trying it again will work.
Okay, cool. And so one of the other things that like I said, you finished a lot more projects than I think a lot of people start a lot of things. I've started tons of ideas and I've never actually taken them to fruition. What does the process for you look like? Like, you've broken it down into these modules. Like, how do you actually get work done, especially not at your day job where there's no boss, there's no one paying you. There's no one who can fire you. How is it that you feel like you are able to what does it look like? What does like a day look like for you if you're like working on a project? And how do you make sure you get those things done?
I think something that I think something that's very important is like, while I'm working on these projects, I have in the back of my head kind of an idea of why I'm really here working on this project. Like, for me, I'm not doing this project to actually get the end result of it often. Like, it's a cool idea and it's very motivating, but I'm not afraid to rescope my project or actually change my goal as I'm going, as I realize that certain paths are very difficult. Like, when I'm working on projects, and especially when I'm like working on projects with the purpose of learning, which is pretty much every project, I try to take stock when I start projects out or plan them out of like, what do I know? Like, what skills have I recently gotten a little more confident in, or and so maybe that was like I learned how to do the Hello World on an Android, an Arduino board or something, and then Particle made it so I figured out like how to make a button recently work on a Particle. So that is like something I know. When I'm thinking about what I want to do in my projects next, I want to go like one step outside of my comfort zone. So, but not too far. If it goes too far, like, it's going to be very difficult to actually get there and feel like I've completed something. And so it's very important to be able to, even in the middle of a project, like, know when it's know that it's okay to redefine your goal as you're going, and take a step back and realize that, like, one day you may get there and you might figure out how to do this thing that's very difficult and seems impossible right now. But I think as long as you're doing incremental things to just learn something new and learn something a little bit outside of what you previously knew, you'll eventually kind of complete this graph of knowledge and figure out, okay, eventually, like, okay, now I do, 6 months later, know how to do that thing I couldn't figure out 6 months ago.
Yeah, well, and so you also, one of the words that you used a lot was like learning knowledge, like stepping outside of your comfort zone, like that sort of general process of like just constantly pushing yourself to learn something new. Like how do you feel like that's contributed to your life? I mean, I know that you're working on, I think you're working on a project that's very much along that line of things. Like, is that something you think that employers, someone like you, if you were to be looking for interns or later on full-time employees from, people who've gone to CodeLabs, like, is that something that you're kind of looking for? And what sort of role do you feel like that plays versus, just knowing the right answer to something ahead of time?
I think it's extremely important to be like someone who's open to learning the faster you learn, or sorry, the more interested you're in learning, the more interested I am in kind of working together. I think that especially at the intern phase of one's career, like the most important thing is how curious and kind of absorbing all this information, rattling it around in your head, and then coming up with a new idea and presenting that to the team and working on that and pursuing that together. That's extremely important. It's important, especially in the intern phase, because at that point you're not expected to be independently working on large projects on your own. It's kind of a temporary gig, something to try it out. And everybody hopes that you're there to learn, and that those new ideas contribute back to the team, like we hadn't because we were too stuck in our existing ways of thinking. As you progress through your career, like the role flips a little bit. Like you still need to be curious to learn throughout your entire career. And I think that for example right now, to be specific about what I do, I work on simulation. And so our charter is to try to simulate every aspect of an Uber Air network. So these vehicles don't exist yet. No one's manufactured them yet. But with physics and kind of operations research knowledge and modeling out and simulating everything from pilot to the vehicle to the battery and to the airspace management rules, and following some laws of physics and stuff like that, we can actually extrapolate what we think the future might look like. So in the context of that job, you always have to be coming up with these new ideas and following that curiosity. The project phase that we're at right now is like moving from this kind of like product market fit to more of a growth stage. We're doing less and less of like 0 to 1, something that doesn't exist and we have to invent it because we have no concept of this thing, to one where it's like now we're doing a little more incremental improvement on top of these things. And for me, I have to now learn how to be on a team that is in a growth stage, which is a very different way of thinking at than it is when there's nothing there, and it almost doesn't matter what you come up with, as long as the thing that is representative of this piece in the puzzle that is currently completely unknown, a little more known. Now we're trying to refine existing pieces and make them more advanced and all that.
So from a day-to-day perspective, I think a lot of this you're working on projects right now are kind of in that what you call the 0 to 1 phase. Like you don't have anything and you're trying to build this thing. How do you feel like that differs, from a lot of those projects that you've worked on to what your day-to-day looks like now that you're like you said, Uber Elevated is more of the you're trying to improve on things that you've already made before. Like what's the difference in terms of the sort of work that you're doing maybe?
Between 0 and 1 and kind of improvements on existing things.
Yeah.
I'd say like it's always important to be able to work really well with a team and be able to have strong interpersonal relationships with the people on your team, to be able to talk about like disagreements or maybe different ideas and way to do things and kind of drive to some kind of consensus. But I'd say one of the big differences between inventing something from scratch and being in more of a growth stage is actually along the way, as you start to prove that this thing you're building and inventing is valuable, your team is also growing. Like you end up getting more resources and more people. And with that comes additional challenges around getting people to agree or move forward on a path where they mostly agree that this is like the right way to go. And so I'm finding myself right now spending a lot more time trying to articulate like a framework or a way to make decisions or make agreements together, and across multiple offices and more than just myself and a small group of people around me. And so that is definitely like what pops out as like one of the big differences between.
Yeah. Well, so and on that same sort of note too, when you're talking about that sort of like working with different people, and I think this is something that we've talked about before. I think a lot of students maybe think the job of a programmer is about you're given this thing that you need to do and you just do it and that's kind of it. And I think that in your experience at least, and certainly in my experience, that is not really the case as much. Like, what does an average day look like for you in terms of like, where are you spending your time? You know, you get into the office at X in the morning. You said you're not a morning person, so I don't know if you tend. You know, whenever it is, like, what does that day look like for you until the time you come home?
Well, when it comes to, I mean, just to talk on your first thing, programming for me has never really been an individual sport. Like it's always included a lot of people around me. There's always a lot of like it's not really something that I can just work on in a corner, because when I do that or when I have done that, the world keeps moving on around me. And what you'll find is that if everybody works in isolation, you'll end up duplicating a lot of work. Or that your solutions might look, and then to consolidate that and glue them back together again is very hard to do. And so a lot of my day-to-day and kind of a lot of my thinking time goes into proactively thinking about the kind of fundamental concepts, let's say, that go into how to I guess a specific example is like, in order to simulate pretty much everything about an Uber Air world, we had to think, okay, first, how do you define the world? Like, what's the definition of every actor in the system? And instead of like reactively defining those things as they came up and as kind of a product management person over there or someone over here told us that they needed, the engineers worked very proactively to define ahead of what the definition of the world might be. And then I spend a lot of time kind of one-on-one with different folks, and then with larger groups, talking about how to consolidate concepts and how to do things in one way instead of multiple ways. Like a little bit of investment up front can have like a long-term return on that investment. And sometimes it's hard to realize that taking a step back and investing and agreeing on something now, or thinking a little more about it now, even in the face of deadlines and just trying to move as fast as you possibly can, actually can really pay off. I think it's easy to over-index on like trying to move as fast as you possibly can without even thinking about it, without even thinking about the long term.
For sure. Do you feel like then, thinking back to some of those projects that you worked on, you know, when you were just getting started, is that something where you kind of, I don't know, like what is your advice to yourself? Is that something you wish you had done more of? Is that sort of like planning phase? Do you feel like you were always good at that? Do you feel like it's not as important to do as much planning when you're working on a personal project as well? Like, you know, knowing what you know now, is that something you think is maybe more important than you thought? Or do you feel like there's a balance when you're building something smaller too?
I think in the early phases, like in the first year or two or three of building projects, I don't think it's important to spend a lot of time planning. I think it's actually more important to be focusing on what do I feel confident in, and what's a project that kind of reuses those skills. And then what do I not feel as confident in, but is something new that I want to learn, and pick a project that can somehow include that. When you get to the point where you feel very confident and have in a lot of skills, and have had the experience of building a lot of kinds of systems and projects, and when you're frankly being paid to make systems, at a company that need to last years, not days or weeks or months, that's when planning becomes really important, because other people are depending on you now to deliver something that isn't going to put them into a corner a year or two from now. Hopefully, they want it to last longer. And so when I'm working on projects, I don't focus too much on planning. I focus more on planning when it's valuable to do that planning, when there's a good reason to do it. And sometimes though, with projects, like if you look on some of those ones in Hackaday that I passed around, those have a bit of planning in them. And the reason for that was because I wanted to explain to an audience how I thought about things before doing them. And so in that case, the journals on the planning there, or like the journals on the things I tried out, they had a purpose. They weren't just for myself. At that point, I was trying to share with others. Maybe they could learn from my experience.
For sure, that makes sense. So I know that I think I told you about a half an hour, so we're getting near-ish the end of the time. Anything else that you wanted to share with people in terms of, I think that a lot of these students are in the state that you were in back in 2012 when you started going to CodeDay. Like, what would you be doing now? Obviously, you've ended up very successful, so you didn't make bad choices. But like, is there anything that you've learned from your day-to-day life now at Uber that you feel like would actually be, you wish you had known when you were just getting started?
Well, I think the biggest thing I think just, it's funny, although it's important to be a great programmer and a great software engineer, in your career, if you are going to be a software engineer, I think it's actually more important to hone in on your soft skills and your ability to communicate with people and with groups of people. And if I had, I think it was kind of serendipitous, or I was lucky that I was put in these learning environments in CodeDay where that was encouraged from the beginning. But if there was one thing I would have done differently, like at that first CodeDay I was at, I didn't know JavaScript. But we were going to build a web app. I knew like a little bit of Ruby, not a bit of HTML. I asked, and I was building with one of my friends, Shadi, who did know JavaScript and a little more Sinatra. If I had asked more questions at that first CodeDay and felt that like kind of brave enough to do that and explore even more, I probably would have gotten more out of it. I got a lot out of it. I think I asked plenty of questions, but I could have realized earlier that it was okay to ask any question, and it's okay to even ask what might be in my head like a stupid question to someone that is there. Because especially at CodeDay, and especially when you're with your friends, like everyone there should be there to learn and to help each other. There's not really any other reason that people are there. It's not really like, I don't think competitive environments are very good in early phases of people's learning. I don't think they're really at all. The competitive environments are to, I guess, show off what you've learned already, but the actual learning happens when working with other people and working on projects together. I guess one other exercise that I learned a few years ago that has been really helpful to me with relationships in particular, like with my first manager at Takius, which was my previous job, was an exercise called I Like, I Wish. So when I first started at Takius, I had a manager, and although we got along together pretty well, we just didn't quite click all the time. We didn't quite vibe right. And so I asked him if he'd be willing to do this exercise with me a few times for a couple weeks at least, until everything kind of felt there. in place called I Like I Wish. And in that exercise, what I do is, or what we both do is we say to each other, like, I wish that, or I usually start with I like. So like, I like the way that you communicated this thing to me during this week. And I kind of list off the things that I liked. And then I would say, I wish though that we had talked about this differently. Like, I wish that we had written out this plan ahead of time rather than it being told to me, 30 minutes before it was due. Or even if it's more of a subtle thing, like, I wish that you had expressed this opinion in a different tone because it came off to me like you were upset. But where I didn't really think you should have been upset in that case, I felt like it was reasonable that I didn't know this thing. And so it's by doing that, we kind of redefine the relationship from a very early phase in that employment to one where it was okay to give that feedback to each other. It was okay. We kind of broke down that wall or that barrier that you might have up with people. It's kind of a vulnerable thing to do, but I think it's a very valuable thing to do, especially if you're getting the feeling that something personality-wise isn't quite clicking. It's really worth exploring that with that person and trying to fix that with exercises like I wish.
Cool. Chris, thank you so much. Really good takeaways in terms of it's really important to learn how to work with people now rather than later, because it's going to be important throughout your career. Finding something cool that you like doing and just sort of taking it step by step, not needing to plan out the entire thing in advance, like pushing yourself to do projects that you feel like you are always a little bit outside of your comfort zone. It's really, really great takeaways. Thank you so much. And it's always really great to hear from someone who started out at a CodeDay many years ago and has become, a successful, really cool person. So it's always great to talk with you.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler.
And tomorrow night, just for everyone who's watching on the live stream, we are actually going to talk with another person who Chris knows pretty well, and I don't think any of you know anymore, who's actually also works at Uber, which is Edward Jang, the original founder of SR&D and one of the co-founders of CodeDay itself, and the person I think who ended up originally referring Chris for the job or for a different job, I think, than the one he actually got. But
yeah, funny story. Edward was the one who did basically help me find this job. Yeah. His recruiter was the recruiter for his team, and he's like, "Oh, you should come work with me." And then I told the recruiter what I was interested in doing, and he's like, "Well, there's not actually a good fit on Edward's team, but does flying cars sound interesting?"
Meanwhile, I think Ed is working on like mobile something, which is like cool, but I feel like you really lucked out.
I was like into visualization, front end, and hardware, and Edward was working on like back end API and mobile, and that wasn't quite the fit, but I guess Elevate was. So yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much. For everyone else, hope we see you tomorrow night at 5 Pacific is when we're going to be talking with Ed, and he's going to be talking about how not to do work on projects, and more specifically, how to make sure that you're not doing like stupid work on projects that's not helpful. And I'm sure Ed will have lots of other pearls of wisdom because he usually does. If anyone has any questions for Chris, feel free to post them in the SR&D chat. I will get them over to him. And we'll also, in the Twitch chat right now, earlier we posted the list of Chris's projects, but I will also send that out to everyone for CodeLabs if you want to take a look at those. Chris, maybe one final question before we go. You got a lot of press for some of your projects. Like, is that something that's something that students can do? Like, how did you do that?
Like press? What do you mean?
I mean, they were in Hackaday, right?
Oh, well, so hackaday.io is different than hackaday.com. You can actually go to hackaday.io and isn't like in any press release for them there.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I didn't even know that was something you could do. Do you feel like that is something that's important to do, though, is like showing off projects like that?
I think, when you feel like the time is right and you feel confident in and you feel like you actually like want to do that, I think it's a great idea. I actually did that in part because I wanted it to help me like with my career portfolio. Like when I was applying for jobs, I wanted to be able to send my writing and my thoughts process to recruiters, and so I thought it was really valuable at that later stage where that was what my goal was at that time. It's also just fun. I ended up putting in the Hackaday competition because I do one of those every year, and they were doing like IoT stuff. So it's just fun to like see what happens when you throw it in there. And get a lot of comments on it and stuff like that. I guess the one thing to get utilization animation for Uber. We do these big summits every year, and so that did get a mention. But that was for work, I guess.
Yeah.
We are trying to open source that stuff, though. I think it's really important to do as much open source work as possible.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Thank you so much. I will let you get back to the very important work that you were doing, trying to move everyone into the future that no one actually thought was possible for like the past. I think everyone thought it was distant future, but it's definitely a really cool job to be able to work on something like that day to day. So thank you so much. And for everyone else, we are excited to hopefully see you tomorrow.